Okay, hi everybody, thank you for coming. And today's shir is dedicated for a refuah shlema for Chaim Shimon ben Elka. May he have a refuah shlema b'soch shachar Yisrael, and an aliyat neshama for Sybil bas Avram Chaim, as well as the father and brother of Chaya Feingold, David Moshe ben Avram Fischel, Chaya's father, and Yonatan Yisrael ben David Moshe, Chaya's brother. Again, may all of our learning be le'iloi nishmatam. We have a very big holiday coming up in a few days, and I thought we would talk about the holiday of Shavuos today. And when we ask ourselves, what is Shavuos celebrating? So the obvious answer is what the Siddur says it's celebrating. Zaman Matan Torasenu, the day that God gave us the Torah. So first of all, just as a matter of basic definition, we certainly did not get the whole Torah on Shavuos. We got the mitzvos over a period of time. So when we say the whole Torah, we mean Hashem revealed himself to the Jewish people and gave them the 10 commandments, which is the root and the shoresh of all of the mitzvahs and like. So that's the first thing to understand. We didn't get the whole Torah on Shavuos, but we heard Hashem give the Aseres Hadibros. That's point number one. But the second point to make is very interesting. The Torah nowhere says that that's the reason why you celebrate Shavuos. The Torah does identify a holiday that you celebrate after counting 49 days. And that holiday is called Shavuos because it comes after 7 weeks. But the only reason the Torah gives for celebrating Shavuos is an agricultural reason. It talks about it as the time of the first fruits. It talks about it as the time of the wheat harvest. It does not give the most important reason that this is the day that Hashem gave us the Torah. In fact, the only way Chazal even know that Shavuos is Matan Torah is by making a number of calculations. Now, we do know from the Chumash that the Jewish people arrived at Mount Sinai Rosh Chodesh Sivan. And then we know there were dialogues for several days, culminating in the Aseres Hadibros. But you don't really know that it was on the 6th day. Chazal, figure it out. But it's a very indirect way. I mean, you would think that the giving of the Torah is a much more important thing than the wheat season harvest. So why does the Torah de-emphasize the importance of Shavuos by relegating it to an agricultural festival? Now, agricultural festivals are important. I don't mean to demean their importance. But certainly we would look at Matan Torah as transcendentally important. So the Maharal gives a fascinating explanation. He says, God could not have made a holiday out of Matan Torah. Why is that? Because whether Matan Torah is a joyous day or not does not depend on God. It depends on us. If I live my life by following Hashem's Torah, then it becomes the greatest day that ever existed. If I don't live my life following God's Torah, then maybe I'd be better off without it, because once it's given, there's accountability, there's responsibility. So in a sense, Hashem could say the following: listen, even if you don't keep the Torah, Shavuos is a happy day because at least there's a wheat harvest. So the wheat harvest is a reason that applies to everybody. But the simcha of Matan Torah is a function of how I live my life. And therefore, Hashem says, you can make this the most joyous day of your life, or you could make it a tragic day. That's up to you. That's not up to God. As Chazal say, Hakol bidei Shemayim, everything is in the hands of heaven except the decision to fear Hashem, to serve Hashem, because that's Bechira, that's free will. And that's an amazing thing. Yes, God is omnipotent. God controls everything, but God, so to speak, abdicated his control over my decision to worship him or not to worship him. That's my decision. That's not his decision. Now, I need Hashem's help. Without Hashem's help, I'm not going to be able to conquer the Yetzer Hara. But I have to make the decision that that's what I want to do. Once I decide I want to do it, then we have the rule. The way you want to go is the way Hashem is going to lead you. Hashem is like a taxi driver. You tell the driver where you want to go. You want to go in the derech of righteousness? Hashem will assist you. You want to go the other way? Hashem will help you out that way also. You have to decide. It reminds me a little bit of a thought that is sometimes expressed in the morning brachos, Birchas HaShachar. We make 3 brachos in the negative. We thank Hashem. He didn't make me a goy. He didn't make me a slave. And the men make the bracha, didn't make me a woman, etc. Because men have more mitzvos. That's a whole other talk in itself. But simply, men have more mitzvos. Let's just keep it at a simple level. But people ask the question, why do we thank Hashem for negatives? Why don't we express it in the positive? Thank you, Hashem, for making me a Jew. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, Sha'asani, and men and women can both say this, Sha'asani Yisrael. Now, there actually is in the Ramah. The Ramah does bring such an opinion. So there is such an opinion, but we don't follow that. We make the bracha in the negative. So there's a thought in Chassidish Svarim that Hashem doesn't make you a Jew. You make yourself a Jew. Now, that's not a halachic statement. Certainly halachically, if you're born a Jew, you're a Jew. But in a spiritual sense, you forge your identity as a Jew. The most you could say to Hashem is, by not making you a non-Jew, He's given you the capacity to become a Jew. But whether you're really a Jew is your choice, not Hashem's choice. And that's why the Maharal says, Matan Torah is not necessarily a simcha. It all depends on what you do with the Torah. You serve the Torah, you keep the Torah. It's a great, great joy. You don't keep the Torah, then maybe you're better off without it in that sense. Now, but here I want to ask another question. It's not my question. There's a very, very famous question the Magen Avraham asks. The Magen Avraham is one of the great commentators on the Shulchan Aruch. And that is, there's a machlokas in the Gemara. Did Hashem give the 10 Commandments on the 6th of Sivan or on the 7th of Sivan? Now, that's not a machlokas when Shavuos is. Shavuos is certainly on the 6th. But when did Hashem give the 10 Commandments? And to the various technical reasons the Gemara gives, it actually turns out that we paskin that the 10 Commandments were given on the 7th of Sivan. In other words, they weren't given on Shavuos. I mean, don't tell people, they may be traumatized, but according to the opinion that says the Torah was given on the 7th of Sivan, nothing happened on the 6th of Sivan. Amazing. So, at least in Chutz La'aretz, they get it right. Because it turns out the real day of Matan Torah is the 2nd day of Shavuos, 7th of Sivan. Now, let me ask the kasha, the Magen Avraham asked the kasha another way, because you might say, well, listen, who cares what date the Torah was given? Shavuos, after all, is actually not defined in terms of a date. Unlike Pesach, that's the 15th of Nisan. And unlike Yom Kippur, that's the 10th of Tishrei. And unlike Sukkot, that's the 15th of Tishrei. The Torah does not define Shavuos as the 6th of Sivan. The Torah defines Shavuos as the 50th day of the Omer. Now, there's something you need to understand about the Jewish calendar. The only reason Shavuos is on the 6th day of Sivan is because based on our present calendrical system, the month of Nisan always has 30 days, and the month of Iyar, these are the 2 months in between Pesach and Shavuos, always has 29 days. So the 50th day of the Omer will always be on the 6th of Sivan. But that's only because we have a fixed calendar. In the time of the Beis HaMikdash the calendar was not fixed. Any given month depended on when witnesses showed up and saw a new moon. So any given month could be 29 days or 30 days. So it actually turns out that if both Nisan and Iyar were 29 days, your 50th day of the Omer would be on the 7th of Sivan, because you had fewer days in Nisan and Iyar. If Nisan and Iyar were both 30 days, the 50th day would be the 5th of Sivan. And if Nisan is 30 and Iyar is 29, which happens to be our calendar, the 6th is 6th of Sivan is Shavuos. Now, Shavuos is a floating holiday. Shavuos can either be 5, 6, or 7. The only requirement is it's the 50th day of the Omer. So you might make the argument, okay, so even if the Ten Commandments were given on the 7th, maybe the calendar was set up that was the 50th day of the Omer, and we celebrated on the 50th day of the Omer, which is the 6th of Sivan in our calendar. You might give that as an answer? Says the Magen Avraham, that's not true. I'll prove to you that not only was the Torah given on the 7th of Sivan, but the Torah was given on the 51st day of the Omer. Our Shavuos is totally wrong. How do we prove this? Because the Gemara in Shabbos says that we left Mitzrayim. This is a tradition. We don't have proof for this, but we left Mitzrayim on a Thursday. That means the first day of Pesach was Wednesday night, Thursday. So when do you start counting the Omer? The second night, which is Thursday night, Friday. So let's just say Friday. So Friday was day 1 of the Omer. The Gemara also says we got the 10 Commandments on Shabbos. So let's figure it out. If the first day of the Omer is Friday, the 49th day of the Omer is Thursday, the 50th day of the Omer is Friday, we got the Torah the day after on Shabbos. The 51st day of the Omer. So the Magen Avraham's kasha is a gewaldik kasha. How can we celebrate that? Now the Torah says we celebrate Shavuos on the 50th day of the Omer, which based on our present calendar is the 6th of Sivan. And yet, the Torah was given on the 51st day of the Omer, which was the 7th of Sivan. So we are celebrating Matan Torah on the wrong day. Now, this is not a kasha on us. This is a kasha on Hashem. In other words, it's not that we made a mistake in when we celebrate Shavuos. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, you celebrate Shavuos day 50. Right? The kasha is not just, we made a mistake. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says you celebrate Shavuos on day 50, even though the Torah was not given until day 51. We are celebrating the wrong day. Why is Shavuos the day of commemorating Matan Torah? So the Magen Avraham gives the following answer. On the 4th of Sivan, that's tonight, right? The 4th of Sivan, Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu, tell the Jewish people to separate from their wives and prepare themselves spiritually today, the 4th of Sivan, and tomorrow, the next day, and I will come and give them the Torah on the 3rd day. Which means they separated on the 4th of Sivan, the 5th of Sivan, and Hashem said, I will give them the Torah the next day on the 6th of Sivan. Moshe communicated to Bnei Yisrael, he deviated from what God said. And instead of saying, prepare yourselves today and tomorrow, and God will come the 3rd day, Moshe said, prepare yourself for 3 days. And then God will come. I'll discuss how we could do that. So it turns out that based on Hashem's original statement, separate on the 4th and the 5th, and I will come on the 6th, the Torah would have been given on the 6th of Sivan, which is Friday and the 50th day of the Omer. But because Moshe Rabbeinu added an extra day on his own volition, Hashem deferred Matan Torah. So we celebrate Shavuos. It's an amazing conclusion. We celebrate Shavuos not on the day that Hashem actually gave the Torah. We celebrate the Shavuos on the day that Hashem would have given the Torah had Moshe not added an extra day. In other words, based on Hashem's original plan, the Torah would have been given on Friday, which was day 50. Moshe, now we'll explain how could Moshe add. We'll explain that. Moshe Rabbeinu added, on his own volition, an extra day, which Hashem deferred to. And the Gemara in Shabbos actually says there were 3 things where Moshe took initiative on his own, without a commandment from Hashem, and Hashem agreed it was the right thing after the fact. The first of these things was, he added a day of preparation to Matan Torah. God said, prepare on the 4th and the 5th, and I'll give you the Torah on the 6th. Moshe said, prepare on the 4th, the 5th, and the 6th, and I'll give you the Torah on the 7th. Right? That's the first thing Moshe did. The second thing Moshe did was, from the time of Matan Torah onwards, Moshe became celibate with his wife. Now Hashem didn't tell him to separate from his wife. I mean, all of the Jewish people separated for 3 days, but Moshe remained permanently celibate because he felt he had to be on call for prophecy 24/7. Hashem didn't tell him to do that, and indeed, that's never been the Jewish way. In fact, if anyone else would try to have that behavior, that would be totally wrong. And of course, that was even the subject of the Lashon Hara that Miriam said against Moshe, that it was not right. But for Moshe, this was his unique madrega. He made that decision on his own. Hashem agreed. And the third instance of Moshe Rabbeinu making a decision on his own initiative was 40 days later, when he comes down and he sees the Egel, and he smashes the Luchos. Hashem didn't tell him to do that, but Hashem said that was the right decision. Actually, the Gemara explains that, maybe we'll talk about this a little later, but the Gemara explains that Moshe didn't do this out of anger, chas v'shalom, but rather the Luchos were like a wedding ring that Hashem gave us, and worshiping the Egel is adultery. So Moshe wanted to smash the wedding ring so Hashem would look at us like a single woman that is promiscuous and not a married woman, and the standard might be more lenient. As Moshe Rabbeinu's kavanah was, we should be judged like Penuya, a single woman, and not like Eshes Ish, not like a married woman. Okay. So, be it as it may, though, the tamtzis of the Magen Avraham answer, which is quite astounding, again, maybe don't tell your kids, they might be traumatized, is that the Torah was not given on the 6th of Sivan, or the 50th of the Omer, but this was the day that Hashem would have given the Torah, had Moshe Rabbeinu not added a day of preparation. By the way, this actually means a little bit that what we call the 3 days of preparation, right? Even today we commemorate 3 days of preparation. They're actually not the same 3 days of preparation that the Jews had in the Midbar. In other words, the 3 days of preparation of the Jews were the 4th, 5th, and 6th, with the Torah being given on the 7th. But since we celebrate Shavuos on the 6th, we actually start our 3 days of preparation a day earlier, 3, 4, 5. See, we have to do that because the 6th becomes Shavuos, and you need 3 days. But the first year, that's not the way it was. Shavuos, I don't mean Shavuos, but the Matan Torah was on the 7th. So the 3 days of preparation were 4, 5, 6. That's an interesting observation in and of itself. Okay. So the Magen Avraham does not elaborate on this beyond this answer that the 6th of Sivan, the 50th of the Omer, is the day that God wanted to give the Torah, and that's why it's Man Matan Torah. But the question you might ask is, why should the hypothetical day be more significant than the real day? Sof kol sof, Hashem gave the Aseres HaDibros on the 7th of Sivan. He would have given it on the 6th, but he didn't give it on the 6th. So why is Matan Torah the hypothetical day and not the actual day? So to understand this, there's a famous darshan of the 19th century. Actually, it was a big gadol b'Torah, the Emek Yoshua, Rav Yeshua of Slanim, who offers a very, very beautiful explanation of the Magen Avraham's answer. And this is based on one of the most famous agados in all of Shas, a Gemara that is very, very rich in many, many different perspectives. And this involves what's called the oven of Achnoi, Tanor Shel Achnoi. The word Achnoi means a snake. And this involved a kind of an arcane technical problem. We know that vessels that come in contact with dead people or dead animals become ritually impure. You have to take them to a mikveh or whatever it would be. Or if they're earthenware, actually, you cannot take it to a mikveh, you have to smash it. We also know, however, that once something is broken or smashed, it's not susceptible to be makabel tuma because it's no longer a kli. So the shaila that the Gemara is debating, it's an arcane shaila, is, let's assume you had an earthenware oven that you wanted to transport from place to place. So the way they would do it is they would cut it into horizontal rings. If you're a little older, you might remember hula hoops. So imagine an earthenware oven that was cut into hula hoops. So you'd carry them on your arm, these hula hoops, and when you wanted to assemble it, you would pile the hoops on top of each other. You would put mud in between the hoops, and when the mud would dry, you would have an oven. Right? The mud would be like the mortar. And when it was time to move on, you just shook out the mud or washed away the mud, and you carried the hoops. So the shaila is, if the hoops come in contact with the dead, are the hoops makabel tuma? One opinion says, well, it's like a broken vessel. It's a bunch of broken rings, and it's not makabel tuma. Another opinion says, well, it's not really broken. You just assemble it and reassemble it, and that's the way you use it. So it's a technical machlokas. The reason it's called achnoi, snake, because a snake can take its tail in its mouth and form a circle. So these rings were described as snake-like rings. So the Gemara records a machlokas between the sages, the majority, the Chachamim, and Rabbi Eliezer, in which the sages said, Tameh, it's considered to be a functional vessel and it's Tameh. Rabbi Eliezer says, Tahar. Now, normally the halacha is like the majority, but he refused to give in, and he brought all sorts of proofs, and they did not accept his proofs. So finally, he decided to utilize supernatural evidence that he was correct. He said, if the halacha is like me, let the carob tree uproot itself and fly away. And the carob tree uprooted itself, flew away. The Chachamim said, sorry, we don't listen to trees. He then said, if the halacha is like me, let the river reverse its course and flow in the other direction. And the river reversed its course. And they said, we don't listen to rivers. And then he said, if the halacha is like me, let the walls of the Beis Medrash collapse inward. And the walls began to move inward. And Rabbi Yoshua ordered the walls, don't you dare move. So the walls didn't know who to listen to. Should they listen to Rabbi Eliezer and come in? Or should they listen to Rabbi Yoshua and straighten out? And because of that, the walls remained slanted Ad Hayom Hazeh. Apparently, in the time of the Gemara, there still was this Beis Medrash with slanting walls, like the Leaning Tower of Pisa, and the Gemara attributes it to the walls not knowing who to listen to. Well, as you would guess, the Chachamim said to Rabbi Eliezer, we don't listen to walls. So Rabbi Eliezer did 3 miracles to show that he's right. Obviously, these miracles come from Hashem. There was the tree, there was the water, there was the Beis HaMedrash. Finally, he gets out the big guns and he says, if the halachas like me, there should be a heavenly voice. Hashem should announce that I'm correct. This is called a bas kol. A bas kol came from heaven. And a bas kol said, halacha ke Rebbe Eliezer. There's not too much wiggle room to deny that. And the Chachamim said to Hashem, we don't listen to heavenly voices, God. You yourself said in your Torah, Lo b'shamayim, the Torah is not in heaven. You gave us a process by which we resolve halacha. And we followed that process, and we followed your rules. You cannot interfere. And indeed, the Rambam takes this as a solid halachic principle, that a prophet who comes, and even an established prophet, I don't mean a false prophet, a prophet comes and tells you that God intends that a certain mitzvah should be done differently or a mitzvah should be abrogated, unless it's an emergency short-term change, like Eliyahu authorized the bringing of sacrifices at Mount Carmel outside of the Beis HaMikdash, that's temporary. In fact, one of the main reasons, again, Rabbi Tuvi Singer could talk about this at much greater length, but one of the main reasons, not the only reason, why Christianity cannot be accepted within Judaism is it teaches that the Torah was superseded by subsequent prophetic revelation. And that's not possible. Lo b'shamayim. So, as a result, Rabbi Eliezer was overruled, even though there was a bas kol. Lo b'shamayim. And the story has a sad ending. He was actually excommunicated. He was really the greatest rabbi in Israel. But because he did not accept the view of the Sanhedrin, he was excommunicated, which meant, among other things, he could no longer teach Torah. He was elderly and he was sick, and they delegated his student Rabbi Akiva to inform him of the excommunication. And Rabbi Akiva enters his bedroom, and he stands at a distance, because when someone is excommunicated, you're not supposed to be in their 4 cubits. And Rabbi Akiva stands at a distance, and Rabbi Eliezer says, "What's wrong, my son? What's wrong?" And Rabbi Akiva said, "It appears that your colleagues have separated themselves from you." That's how he informed him. And Rabbi Eliezer broke down, sobbing, because he said he is like a Sefer Torah that's totally rolled up tightly. There's so much Torah here, but it's closed and it's locked and it's tied. And all of that Torah can never be revealed. It was an awful thing. Now, what's interesting is, the Nasi, the head of the Sanhedrin that excommunicated Rabbi Eliezer, was Rabban Gamliel. Rabban Gamliel's sister was Rabbi Eliezer's wife. So they were brothers-in-law. So the Gemara recounts that Rabbi Eliezer's wife never let him say the Tachanun prayer in the morning. Why? Because Tachanun is when you pour out your private anguish to Hashem. And she was afraid if he would pour out and express his private anguish, Hashem would punish her brother for causing that anguish, even though it was L'Shem Shamayim. And one day, she made a mistake. So she used to interrupt him. Every time it was time to say Tachanun, she would interrupt him. And the Rishonim say, although he could say Tachanun later, but if you don't say it right after the Amidah, it doesn't have that power. But on Rosh Chodesh, we don't say Tachanun. And one day she miscalculated. She thought it was Rosh Chodesh, so she wasn't monitoring her husband. And it was not Rosh Chodesh. So she walked in seeing him doing Tachanun. So she said to him, "You killed my brother today." In that very moment, they got news that Rabban Gamliel died. Now, I don't think we should assume that Rabbi Eliezer prayed that something should happen to Rabban Gamliel. That would not be what a tzaddik does. Rather, it's Hashem that avenges him. In other words, he was just expressing his anguish and his suffering. And that's going to cause repercussions. And again, this is a complicated idea. This is not punishment for sin. There is no sin Rabban Gamliel committed. Rabban Gamliel did what was necessary to preserve the unity of the people. But when you hurt those who are great and holy, it's like playing with fire. There's going to be a consequence. You can't just say, well, I was justified. So what? If I jump into a fire to save a baby, I'm also justified. But I'm probably going to get burnt most of the time. You see? Okay. And then shortly thereafter, Rabbi Eliezer himself died. So again, it was very, very tragic, this feud. Okay. But I want to go back to the central idea. The Torah is not in heaven. What does that mean? Let's assume, right? New questions in halacha come up all the time, right? When electricity was discovered or utilized, is electricity fire on Shabbos, right? So poskim have to analyze this. Now, when we ask a shaila, is something mutter or something aser? What we're really asking is, what does Hashem want us to do in a given circumstance? I mean, we may not say it that way. We say, well, we'll look at the Gemara, we'll look at the Rambam, we'll look at Rashi, we'll look at Tosfos, we'll look at the Shulchan Aruch, because those are our sources. But really, what we're trying to do is figure out, what would Hashem want me to do? And since B'derech Klal, Hashem does not directly speak to us, so we have to use the second best thing that we have, and that is all of the different sources. But if Hashem tells you what he wants, how could that be irrelevant? How can you say, when we're trying to figure out what the Ratzon Hashem is, Hashem has no input in that process? I mean, let's take a trivial example. Let's imagine that kids are deciding what they want to give their father as a birthday present. So one says, Abba really wants a sefer. And one says, Abba wants whatever it is, a record or a cassette or a CD. Abba wants a tie. Abba wants cufflinks. Or if it's non-Haredi, Abba wants an iPad. Right? Whatever it would be. Or an iPhone. So Abba walks by, and Abba's hearing all the kids discussing what he wants for his birthday. And Abba says, it's very nice of you to want to get me a gift, but what I really want is X. So the kids say back in a very respectful way, please, Abba, don't get involved in this. We're trying to figure out what you want for your birthday. You have nothing to contribute to that discussion. What does that mean? The whole point is what he wants for his birthday, he's telling you. Well, isn't halacha the same thing? What does God want me to do? God tells you what he wants you to do. Lo b'shamayim, we don't listen. Now, you might say, and from a practical standpoint this is quite strong, that the reason we don't rely on heavenly voices or prophets is because we don't really know if it's true. People could lie, people could make things up, people could act under mental illness or delusion. So you might say that the Lo b'shamayim is based on pragmatic concerns, that it's not authentic. And and that is a true idea. But that's not what the Gemara is saying. The Gemara does not say that they rejected the Bas Kol because they said, who said God said it? Rather, they acknowledged, and they were able to verify this, they acknowledged this came from Hashem. And they still said, we don't care. In fact, the Gemara goes on and says that a later rabbi met Eliyahu Hanavi, who goes back and forth between Shemayim and Aretz, right? He's here, he's there. And they said to him, what was Hashem's reaction when the Chachamim say to God, stay out of it, mind your own business? What a chutzpah. Eliyahu Hanavi reported, Hashem laughed, or whatever that means exactly, and Hashem said, Nitzchuni banai, my children have been victorious over me. I'm going to stay out of their fight. I'm going to mind my own business. In other words, Hashem was maskim. Hashem agreed. Lo b'shamayim. So the question becomes, what is the logic that Hashem has no input in a halachic process which is supposed to determine what it is Hashem wants? Now, let me raise another question. Throughout the Gemara, we have Mishnah Gemara, we have numerous machloksim on every conceivable subject. And the machloksim are mutually exclusive. One says kosher, one says treif. One says pure, one says impure. One says guilty, one says exempt. Now, in halacha, we got to follow something, so we have a psak halacha. But objectively, which is right and which is wrong? So the Gemara says, maybe this is not true for every machlokas in the world, but certainly among the machlokim of the great rabbis of the Mishnah and the Talmud, Elu v'elu, divrei Elokim Chaim. These and those are the words of the living God. They are both right. They are both correct. Once again, you have a problem. How can two contradictory propositions both be right? You're telling me it's kosher and treif? It's pure and impure? What does it mean? It's a famous, they tell it's a classic little story about two litigants go before a rabbi to adjudicate their dispute. And the rabbi listens to one guy and says, you're right. And the rabbi listens to the other guy. And he says, you're right. And his Rebbetzin asks them, how can they both be right? He says, you're right too. Everybody's right. Everybody's right? How could that be? So these are two questions that are related. One is, what is the meaning of Lo b'shamayim? We don't listen to heavenly voices. And what is the meaning of Elu v'elu divrei Elokim Chaim? That two contradictory realities can both be true. How can that be? So there is an essay by Rabbeinu Nissim. He's called the Ran, Rabbeinu Nissim, one of the great Rishonim. The Ran was a great commentator on Gemara, but in addition, he wrote a very excellent book called Drashos Haran, which explores some major themes in Jewish philosophy. In fact, there are recent translations. Art Scroll now has a Drashos Haran as well. And it's a worthwhile book to look at. And the Drashos Haran deals with these questions, and he says something that, once again, these are what you might call dangerous ideas. Now, dangerous ideas are not the same as untrue ideas. This is very important. Sometimes we say, this idea is dangerous, meaning it can be abused, it can be twisted, it can be misapplied. Yeah, there are dangerous ideas, but that doesn't mean it's not true when you properly apply it. That's a very important idea. That just because an idea is dangerous doesn't mean it's not true, but it does mean it's prone to misapplication. So this is an idea of the Ran that I think is a dangerous idea, but it's a very profound idea. The Ran differentiates between what you might call mathematical truth and what you might call halachic truth. In mathematical truth, and actually I should qualify that, at least in arithmetical truth, there is only one particular answer to a given equation, And anything else is just false. It's not a matter of opinion. 1 + 1 is 2. If you say 3, you're not entitled to your opinion, you're just wrong. Although there's a great, I don't remember all the details, but a YouTube video how in this multicultural crazy world, 1 and 1 does not have to be 2, it could be 11, whatever it is, different types of things. But in a normal functioning society, mathematical truth has one right answer, and everything else is sheker. Halachic truth is very, very different. It is true that God does have an answer to every possible question. But God did not give us an answer to every possible question. The way Torah Shebaal Peh works is, Hashem gave us principles, and then He left it to the sages of each generation to take those principles and derive conclusions from following this halachic process. Now, I am gliding over some very difficult questions. What is the definition of the halachic process that's authentic? And who are the people that are competent and qualified? Those are biggies. But ignoring those important questions for a moment, Hashem, see, people make a mistake. People think Hashem gave Moshe to give to us every answer to every question. So Hashem told Moshe about electricity, about microwaves, about surrogate motherhood, but He did not. He gave Moshe the principles out of which the sages derive halachic truth. Therefore, just like a professor of mathematics might sometimes give you full credit for following the process, even if there's a computational error at the very end, because you understand the process. Hashem basically says, as long as the right people, so to speak, follow the right process, then whatever conclusions they come up with will be given the imprimatur of divine approval, even if in some objective Platonic sense it was not the answer that God had. Because God wanted the answer to come from the human effort of the sages of the Torah, Klal Yisrael. Which means, even if an answer is wrong, it becomes right. And that's the will of God. Assuming you have people who are following the process. I don't mean conservative reform, people who are following the process. Now, you might say, that's a very messy way to convey law. I mean, if Hashem wants us to live a certain way, He should give us the rules. He shouldn't kind of give us principles and then say, figure it out. And that's why there's machlokas all the time, because you're taking these principles and different people look at it different ways, and machlokas after machlokas after machlokas. Why couldn't Hashem just give us the rules? So there are a few things you could say. Well, first of all, some of the rules wouldn't have been intelligible at the time of Matan Torah. What, should Hashem talk about electricity, atomic energy? That wouldn't be understood. But that's not an answer. Hashem could have given envelopes not to be opened until a certain date. Right, we got the Torah and then a bunch of envelopes to be opened progressively as technology develops. Another answer you might give is, well, there will be too many envelopes. Life is ever changing. It's not possible for Hashem to give specific revelation on every conceivable question. The Torah is eternal and unchanging, but life changes all the time. So Hashem had to, it's almost like by necessity, Hashem had to create an interpretive system. That's an answer too. But I think the most beautiful answer is, Hashem wanted to have a partnership with the Jewish people. The analogy I often use is making a cake. Let's imagine you want to bake a cake, or you want to make a cake for your 4-year-old's birthday. The easiest thing to do is not to bake the cake at all, just go to a good bakery and get it. Simple. But the other way of doing it is, I'll bake the cake when my daughter is asleep or in Gan. Have a nice cake. After 20 minutes, I'll put it in the oven or whatever. Everything's going to be great. But the deepest way of showing your love is to involve your 4-year-old in the making of the cake, in which you become co-creators of this cake. Now, the cake that you make with your 4-year-old is not likely to be as perfect as the cake you'd make yourself, and certainly not as perfect as the cake you'd buy in the bakery. It may be lumpy, it may be uneven. Part of it might be burnt, part of it might be undone. There may be eggshell in the batter. There may be chocolate, there may be cocoa powder on the floor. You could do a much better job without the kid. Why get the kid involved at all? The answer is, when you love somebody, you want them to be involved in the process with you. This is what Torah is. Hashem didn't simply give us a bunch of rules. Hashem, gave us the written Torah, of course, and the principles of the oral Torah, but then says, I want the truth to emerge, not out of what I say in heaven, but out of your work and your struggle. So even when you get it wrong, I like your answer better. I want your answer. Again, for the Chabad people in the room, this is an aspect of Dira B'Tachtonim, that Hashem wants to make his dwelling place in the lowly world. This is actually the way the halachic process works. Hashem says, we're not going to do things the way I decree from heaven. We're going to do things the way you figure it out on earth. Because where I live is with you. Right? So, it's an amazing thing that the giving of the Torah actually means to some degree the giving up of the Torah. Hashem gave Am Yisrael through its Chachamim the power to interpret the Torah. Now again, the reason why I say it's dangerous is because, you hear this and you might think, oh yeah, so Reform can do this, we can just interpret whatever we want. Obviously, there are parameters, there are rules, there are structures, there's procedures. And the only people that have any input are the people who follow those rules and procedures. But at that point, even if they make a mistake, it becomes the will of Hashem. That's why it's called Matan Torah. And in fact, the Gemara in Brachos almost makes this point explicitly. There's a pasuk from Mishlei that we recite every time we put the Torah back. Monday, Thursday, Shabbos. Ki lekach tov nesati lechem, I have given you a good purchase. Torasi al tazovu. Do not abandon my Torah. So the Gemara gives the following mashal. Hashem is not like a basar v'dam, a human being. When a basar v'dam has to sell a precious heirloom, the mocher is very unhappy that I had to sell the Mona Lisa. The buyer is very happy. I got the Mona Lisa. But Hashem is not that way. Hashem sold us the Torah, and he still rejoices. But what's the analogy? When I sell the Mona Lisa, I've given it up. It's not mine anymore. Hashem didn't give away the Torah. But the answer is, based on Lo B'Shamayim, he actually did. He actually did. There's a certain application. Relationship of love. There's another Gemara, which has many, many meanings. The first word of the Ten Commandments is Anochi, I. Ani is the more common word. Anochi is an unusual word for I, but the commandments go with I. So the Gemara in Shabbos says, Anochi is an abbreviation. Right, Aleph, Nun, Chaf, Yud. Ana, I, that's Aramaic. Nafshi, my soul. Kisavis, I have written it. V'yahavis, and I have given it to you. Yahavis, without the vav, Yahavis. In other words, God put, whatever that means exactly, he put his soul He put his essence in the Torah, and he gave it to us. Whether you call it a marriage, which is indeed, Matan Torah is often described as a marriage, or you describe it as a parent to a child. See, again, Hashem is described in all of those different ways. He is our lover. He is our friend. He is our parent. All of these different relationships. In fact, he's even our sister and our brother, meaning every type of human relationship is a reflection of aspects of Hashem relating to us. In fact, there's even a statement that Hashem is also our child. How do you understand that? But Hashem is described as our parent, our king, our child, our spouse, our brother, our sister, right? All of the different things. All of those things come together in the infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And therefore, Matan Torah is really love. It's not just Hashem commanding us. It's Hashem saying, I want the operational truth of how to make this world good to come from a collaboration and a partnership between you and me. I don't want to do all the work. I want you to work with me. You had another Chabad analogy here. You know, Rabbi Manis Friedman, I don't think it bothers him per se, but he's going through rough times in these days because he's constantly talking about the idea that God needs you. And there are some other rabbis on the internet who take very, very deep offense with that idea. And sometimes they spend half of their shiur, God, it's kind of a waste of a shiur time, like attacking Rabbi Friedman for saying these things. And you know, it's a whole big thing. And I think I'm even getting dragged into it because people ask me, and then whatever, it becomes a big mess where everybody's attacking everybody. But the truth of the matter is, I think what Rabbi Friedman says is inescapably true. Because if you assume that everything Hashem does has a reason, that means there's something Hashem wants to accomplish. So that means there is a need. Now granted, I understand that philosophically, every need Hashem has is a self-created need, meaning it's not that Hashem objectively needed it, but He willed. It was His will to need. Okay, I understand it. So philosophically, you have to say that it doesn't come from weakness, it comes from essence. I know this is a difficult philosophical question, but behechrich, if Hashem did something, there is a reason why He did it. And that reason is a need that Hashem has to do that thing. I mean, it has to be. I mean, it's inescapably the fact that God has a need in what He did. Okay, but putting it aside, Hashem's need is that we become His partners. And that's a remarkable, beautiful, powerful idea. So now, if you understand that Matan Torah is not simply God giving us commandments, but God making us His partners in the creation of truth. When is the first time that that actually happened? It happened on Friday, the 6th of Sivan, which was the day that Hashem wanted to give the Torah to the Jewish people. But because of Moshe Rabbeinu's interpretation, Hashem said, I'm going to go with you. That's Matan Torah. Matan Torah is not when Hashem gave us the commandments. Matan Torah is when Hashem deferred to the interpretation of Moshe Rabbeinu, which means Matan Torah was not an act of commission. It was Hashem's omission. In other words, Matan Torah occurred by Hashem not giving the Torah on Friday. And that's the Matan. Ein lecha Matan Torah gadol mizeh. And the Gemara explains actually that when it says Moshe Rabbeinu added a day, it's not that he simply added a day. He misinterpreted God, meaning the Gemara explains in Masechah Shabbos, he thought Hashem's command was 3 days, when in fact Hashem's command was 2 days. So he misinterpreted HaKadosh Baruch Hu's command, and Hashem said, If that's the way you understand it, I'll go with you. That's Matan Torah. And that is why we observe Shavuos not on the day of the Ten Commandments, but on the day when Hashem didn't give the Ten Commandments, in deference to Moshe Rabbeinu's interpretation. So again, it's quite remarkable. Again, as I say, I'm not sure you should share this with your children necessarily, because it is traumatic. I mean, we want people to come to shul to hear the Aseret HaDibros. It certainly is a very, very, very important thing. But at a higher, deeper level, to understand that the Torah was actually given on the 51st day. By the way, there was a great, great Mekubal, Rav Menachem Azaria Mipano. Pano is a city in Italy. He's called the Ramah Reish Mem Ayin Mipano. And again, his history in Kabbalah is actually very, very significant. He was one of the main people who brought the Arizal's Kabbalah from Eretz Yisrael to Europe. So you'll find Ramah Mipano, number one, was a Mekubal, number one, great Mekubal in his own right, and number two, he happened to be very wealthy, I'm not sure from what, and he also financed the publication of all of these Svarim, and even a halachic sefer, the Beis Yosef on the tour. he paid for it, he published it. So he's very, very important in the history of both Kabbalah and the publishing of Svarim generally. But the Ramah Mipano has a very interesting chap a little bit. Why Moshe deferred the Shavuos, deferred Matan Torah to the next day, because he wanted to legitimate the second day of Shavuos in Chutz La'aretz. Now let me explain why this is so. In truth, everybody knows in Chutz La'aretz, you keep, every one day Yom Tov is 2 days, right? You keep 2 days of the first days of Pesach, 2 days of Sukkot, 2 days of Shavuos. Now, the reason why you have to keep 2 days in Chutz La'aretz goes back to the fact that in the olden times, during the times of the Beis HaMikdash, there was no fixed calendar, and Rosh Chodesh was determined by witnesses, and then messengers were sent out to tell people when Rosh Chodesh was. So in Eretz Yisrael, they could reach every part of Eretz Yisrael within 2 weeks, so they always knew when a Chag was, except for Rosh Hashanah, which is the first day of the month. In Chutz La'aretz, the Shluchim couldn't get there in time. So in Chutz La'aretz, you never knew if a month was 29 days or 30 days, so you didn't know when to start Rosh Chodesh, so you didn't know when the Chag was, so you had to keep 2 days misafek. And the Gemara explains, even though today we don't have doubt anymore, but we keep the minhag of our forefathers. Now, if you think about that, that makes sense for Pesach and Sukkos. It doesn't make sense for Shavuos. Because for Shavuos, you don't need to know when Rosh Chodesh Sivan is. You're just counting 50 days from Pesach. And even though when Pesach happened, they weren't sure which day it was, but by the time Shavuos would come, they would know when Pesach was. They got news eventually. So they knew the 50th day, meaning they didn't know what date that would be, but that made no difference. So in reality, one could raise a very, very good question. Why in the diaspora was there ever a need to keep 2 days of Shavuos? 2 days of Pesach, yeah, because we didn't know when Rosh Chodesh Nisan was. 2 days of Sukkot, yeah, because we didn't know when Rosh Hashanah was. 2 days of Shavuos? Even if I don't know when Rosh Chodesh Sivan was, I only have to count 50 days from Pesach, and eventually I found out when Pesach was officially. So the Rambam's answer is, you're right. There is no intrinsic logic to 2 days of Shavuos, but when the sages made the enactment, they didn't want to differentiate, because if they would say 1 day Shavuos, people might not keep 2 days for the other ones. So Ramah Mipano says, Moshe Rabbeinu knew with Ruach HaKodesh that there would be some issue raised about 2 days of Shavuos. So he wanted to make it special that becomes the day of Matan Torah, and therefore people are going to say, oh, I shouldn't keep the second day of Shavuot. That's the day of the Ten Commandments. So essentially, this created validation for Yom Tov Sheni Shel Goliath. This is what Rama Mipano says, why Moshe changed it. But okay, but be it as it may, it is fascinating that, as the Magen Avraham is explaining, Matan Torah was an act of omission, or was an omission rather than a commission, and it reminds us how the Torah is not just the master commanding the servant, but it's a relationship of love and relationship in which we become HaKadosh Baruch Hu's partners in the world. So B'ez Hashem, I wish everybody to have a wonderful, wonderful Yom Tov, have a true Kabbalah Satira with Simcha and with Achdus and with Abbas Yisrael. So,